Welcome back to the channel where this week I just mess around with Forge World. I managed to pick up one of the very old out of production Tauros kits from the Elysian Drop Troops, and I'm really excited to build this thing, but the instructions, they're a piece of crap. This is all you get, so I had to decipher them to the best of my ability, and the rest of it was guesswork and hope. To make things harder, Forge World is made from resin, which means it requires superglue, so I recommend picking up some decent superglue. This stuff is okay, and the stuff on the right is absolutely necessary to stay sane. This is Magic Superglue Activator from Army Painter, but it's essentially just a standard superglue activator. This will make your life so much easier and hopefully avoid you getting stuck to your own fingers. And to help with those little detail bits, a sewing needle is also very useful to run the superglue down. Now on to building. There are tons of flash and mold line bits all over this model. Forge World resin is notoriously quite bad. However, the models and the sculpts are lovely, so we put up with it. But generally, I was just cutting away loads of extra plastic, which is to be expected. I've already sung its praises, but this superglue activator genuinely made my life so much simpler. All I had to do was hold a piece to another piece for a short while, just in time to spray it and then move away. No waiting around for ages for superglue to decide to act, or getting the piece glued to myself. Now these are the front assembly for the suspension, and this was the worst sprue gating I've seen. Literally to the point where this bit I'm clipping off now, I didn't realise wasn't part of the model. That's how bad it was. Eventually though, we got rid of them and I was able to glue the front suspension and back suspension to the vehicle, which bulked it up quite a bit and gave me a nice idea of where things were actually meant to go. Stuff like this on resin models usually scares me because it looks really detailed, but this actually fitted together quite nicely. The cleanup and the superglue parts aside, this was a really well sculpted model. Next up, before I put all the canopy and the roll cage in, is to put the driver in. And it's this little guy. Look at him. He's quite cute and he's really, really small. I attached the steering wheel to his hands, again with superglue, and tacked him into his seat. Fun fact to note, he actually has his little booties cut off at the ankles so he can fit into the seat. So if you're not using him for this, there's very little you can actually use him for. Luckily those amputated feet are covered up by this nice control panel that sits at the front quite snugly. Now he's nicely in place, the next thing to do is to create some more structure and add the roll cage, effectively sealing the driver inside. He looks quite snug, it's quite nice. To get the roll cage to fit correctly, I had to do a little bit of bending, which was kind of scary with how brittle this model can be, but it worked out. The shape was really starting to come together at this point, and it looked pretty cool, like some kind of stripped down muscle car, and I'm a big fan of that. I used the superglue activator again just to make sure everything was completely sealed, and yeah, I'm liking it. I decided to go with the grenade launcher as the main weapon mount on this because it just looked different. The other options are flamer, and we get those everywhere. Grenade launchers are almost exclusively Imperial Guard, it feels. I'm probably wrong. I'm just saying that without thinking. But anyway, it has these two ammo boxes that I glued in that look really cool. The weapon itself has two grenade belts that come out either side, and it can be a little bit difficult to know which way around they go because, as mentioned, the instructions aren't the best. So I just dry fitted and made sure I was happy, and it looks like it worked. Once I was content, I glued it together. There's nothing wrong with dry fitting before gluing. Was it they say measure twice, cut once? And then if they keep screaming, cut again? Something like that. It was at this point I started getting really quite excited despite myself because it was really putting on quite a nice profile. It looks a lot like the Land Raiders from the first Gulf War, which were called Pink Panthers because they were pink. Look them up, the Pink Panther Land Raider. They're pretty awesome, and this reminds me exactly of that. And this also suits my Guard Force really well because they're a drop company with a Pathfinder attachment, and these guys suit the Pathfinder role really well. The next thing to do was put the rear gunner on. I started with his legs. He had some nice belts that hold him into place that fit into these divots here. Now I made a slight mistake here and glued the legs a bit too far back. You think I'd have noticed, but I didn't at all, so we'll come back to that in a bit. To give that a chance to dry, I decided to move straight onto the wheels. They've got this nice chunky double profile wheels at the back and some single ones at the front. It's cool, it's like a mix between an all-terrain buggy and some kind of light armoured vehicle. I really like it. Gluing the wheels on was really nice and simple. I wish the new Outriders and ATVs for these Space Marines were just like this, because they're just ever so slightly more complicated, whereas this is just a single cast wheel. You cut it off, clean it up, stick it on. That's all wheels should be. I can't believe I'm praising a 12-year-old resin kit over brand new Primaris, but there we go. The disclaimer is I do love all the bikes and stuff. I have a White Scars army. Superglue activator coming in clutch again, so I could put the vehicle down and get on with doing the gunner again. Phrasing, boom. So here's the top half of our very angry gunner. I attached his little gunner hands to his gunner arms and then his gunner torso to his gunner waist. That word stopped making sense to me now. But as you can see, as I attach it, I immediately realised that the legs are too far forward. Now you don't see it, but off camera I tried to cut him back off and fix it, but some of the activator that I've so lauded to this point got in the way and it was stuck fast. So we had this little divot at his back. The little bit at the front also has a divot, but it's much harder to see below his arms and between his legs. So what I did is grabbed a little pouch with a grenade, super glued it to the back, and honestly it doesn't look too terrible, and I'm content with it. And with that, the build part is complete, and I'm going to come back for some weathering on the other side of the painting. And just for scale, here's a Krieg-sized guardsman. This thing is tiny. Here we are after painting, and this thing has come together really nicely. I didn't mention previously, but I also added the flamer as like a backup weapon because one grenade launcher didn't seem like enough. All those heady days where you didn't need thousands of guns per vehicle. But let's go straight into the weathering and add some snow to those tyres. I used a rather large old brush and just smushed it on and got it all over my cutting mat, as you do. The cutting mat then just became the palette, and I mushed more snow into the tyres as I went. You might notice the snow gets a bit tinted here, and that's because the old brush I'm using actually still has some pigment left in the bristles that apparently didn't wash out. But no biggie. We're going to add some plants now because they've been rolling over some nice highlands. I used my scalpel to make these big tufty ones from Amazon of all places smaller, and I mushed them into the gaps and crevices where plant life and foliage would get caught up after being ripped from the ground by these chunky tyres. Our old friend the sewing needle came back and allowed us to super glue some of the smaller foliage to the tyres without leaving a huge dollop of glue everywhere. Though occasionally when it was easy to reach I did just dollop some glue on because I'm nothing if not inconsistent. I used my scalpel as a pokey tool to mush some foliage into the top of the mud guards where it would get slammed into the ceiling. I also did a little bit onto these steppy things because it'd be on the guy's boots and also mushed from driving. I don't really know, it looked cool and I like it. And not to get too deep on you guys, but that's all that matters. You should just like your models for whatever reason you do like them. But it's nice if other people like it too, of course. And with that, I was left with this. This was a really fun little project that only took about 4 hours start to finish, including the building, painting, and that really fun little bit of weathering. I'm really looking forward to doing it again because I have the bigger one, the Tauros Venator, to do. If you'd like to see that, let me know in the comments. I've been Sam, see you next time.